Hi, everyone. Welcome to Houston Chronicle Live. And we're here today to talk about trains at McReynolds. I am here with Councilman Castillo. We are recording in progress. We are also here with McReynolds Principal Chastity Caesar and County Commissioner Adrian Garcia and Mr. Shelbitsky, Assistant Vice President for Public Affairs at Union Pacific. Welcome, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm going to start with you, Principal Caesar. You're a middle school principal, and you've got 1,000,001 issues to worry about at the school there. How do trains factor into the daily life of the students and you?
We deal with our trains. It's a safety issue. Safety is our #1 priority. And of course, making sure our kids get to school safely to and from. I've been here for a year and we've had some situations where the kids, prior to me, they would cross when the train is coming over or if it's stalled, going over or under. This year, we instituted that if there's a train on the track, I would keep the kids in the cafeteria until it was clear. This way, I can ensure that those students are not climbing under or over, and making sure that safety, is taken care of. We just deal with the day-to-day. If there's something on the tracks, I reach out to the 1-800 number or Mr. Zentech, and they try to get those off the tracks as fast as possible.
Okay. And have you ever seen any, close calls? Describe what that's like to have to worry about that with the kids.
Upon my first few weeks here, there was a close call with a student. He was trying to go under, and his backpack got caught on something. And as he was trying to release his backpack from being under the train, you could tell that the train was about to start moving. Luckily, he was able to get it out. And that is when, at that point, I had an assembly with my students to let them know we would not go through that process anymore. And the process would be that they would wait on the other side, and making sure that we had someone to walk them across at dismissal and arrival if necessary. It was just a close call, too close for comfort for me. I'm a parent. So I would have dreaded having to make that type of call to any parent. So just making sure that we stay steadfast and keeping our students safe each and every day, with the train being so close to our campus.
Right. And I know you haven't been at McReynolds that long, but you grew up in the 5th Ward?
Yes, ma'am. I am a proud product of 5th Ward. I went to Atherton Elementary and Fleming Middle School, St. Francis of Assisi, as well as Almond of Mercy. So I'm very familiar with the trains. As a kid, I played on them as well. So I totally understand. But knowing now, as an adult, just want to make sure that my kids are safe each and every day.
Right. Okay, Commissioner Garcia, thanks for joining us. You know as well that this is not a new problem. I mean, in fact, it's affected, it seems, literally generations of families there. Why is this still something that kids and parents are having to deal with in 2024?
First of all, thank you for having us, and thank you for having this conversation. It's so critically important, especially for many neighborhoods in Houston's East End and in East Harris County. And you're right, it is not a new problem. In fact, I've been dealing with these challenges with pedestrians and railroad crossings since my days as a Houston police officer. And then when I sat in the role that Councilmember Castillo is currently in, it's not a new issue. And why it is because the Port of Houston has made the need for rail lines to be necessary in our respective area, and we're an unzoned city community, so we have allowed developers to put neighborhoods in areas that are commingled with these rail crossings, and it's created the challenges that we're seeing today, given the density that is continues to grow in our area. And the more that we continue to grow, the more that these challenges will be prevalent. So it is something that we have to come to grips with. And I'm glad to see Clinton here He and I have had a conversation earlier this year, and but the conversation and the interaction with UP has been long missing. You know, when I was on council, Mayor White had to institute a whole initiative installing cameras to track when the trains would stop. And in fact, before I forget, you know, my experience with this in my days as a Houston police officer was dealing with the tragedy of what the principal was just describing. Kids making decisions to get home. And, you know, there's a train that stopped. And in fact, a couple of years ago, I was at McReynolds and saw the train stop, and kids were doing the right thing. They were stopped, they were waiting, they were patient. And then they just became impatient, like what's normal for human nature. So we need to be better partners and better neighbors. And then Houston's density is going to make this a greater challenge. And so I applaud the council member for his leadership on this, and we're collaborating. I am partnering with the 200,000 match for a federal grant that we're seeking, and hopefully we'll get it towards the end of this year. And but the construction of this project will be in the neighborhood of $3 to $4 million, assuming the study proves that it's necessary and that we can build it. So we have to work through this. But it's also why I started the process of doing a transportation and freight study, because we've got to deal with these at-grade crossings, and we have to figure out something. And it looks like the local community will have to pay for those grade separations, assuming the study comes back with some good recommendations.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about the grant in a little bit, but let me ask you, when you talk about Union Pacific being a good neighbor, what do you have in mind? What do you wish that they would do that they're not doing?
Well, be responsive. I mean, when we are dealing with these issues and we're having challenges and trying to understand, we know there's a lot of different reasons. And I think the most current explanation I've heard is that the stoppage it seems to be happening more and more because the cargo line of those trains are getting longer and longer. And but just some communication would be nice. We just don't have that. And when we're dealing with town hall meetings and civic club meetings where the local elected officials are being cannibalized by frustrated neighbors, we look over our shoulders oftentimes, and UP is not there. And so we need to recognize that we're all beholden to the same folks, that that product that those lines are carrying they're trying to get to the same shelves that our neighbors are trying to get to. But it's not a zero-sum game. We have to work together to ensure our economy works, but safety has got to be paramount. And with the ability for rail companies to be able to manage complex yard lines or rail yards, I just think, and without the amount of technology that we have today, I think there's just a better way for rail companies to be able to manage that freight as it moves through complicated areas like the city of Houston.
Right. So let's hear from Union Pacific, Clint Chilbisky. I know that the trains were here first. Everybody knows that. They are so essential to our economy. Houston grew up around them. Got it. But if you guys are able to figure out how to keep a 3-mile train on those tracks, these trains seem to be getting longer and longer. How can you not figure out how to help this community in a permanent way? I know you guys are doing things, you're communicating with the principal, but what you're doing, but tell us what permanent plans you have, if any, to address this.
Yeah, first off, Lisa, thank you for holding this forum. It's an important discussion for us, and I know it's important for all the panelists. Union Pacific has been a part of the Houston community for a long time. we grew up here. We care about the community. We've got 1,600 employees in this region that call Houston home. I guarantee every single one of them wants children to have a safe route to school. That's important to us. It's important to everyone on this panel. When you talk about solutions and permanent solutions, I do want to give some context. We have 100 trains a day that move through Houston, as Commissioner Garcia was mentioning. We supply the freight that this region demands. Our successful economy is what brings the trains to the area, supporting both our consumer demand, our industrial production, and the ports along the ship channel and all along the Gulf Coast. So we do have a responsibility to bring that freight to this market to support the demand, to support Houston's economy. That's important to all of us as well. But we have to do it safely, right? That's a key for all of us. I've been here about 3 years. Early on in my time here, I met Principal Caesar's predecessor, Principal Huron, and we talked about this issue. She gave us a lot of good feedback, a lot of the stories that you're hearing today that Principal Caesar mentioned. We immediately took that feedback. We engaged our operating team. We engaged the team that is responsible for controlling our train traffic through this area. And we've implemented some practices and protocols. When you talk about solutions, you can put them in a number of different categories: operational, engineering and investment, and education and information. What I'm talking about right now is the operational changes that we made. These are what I hope to be permanent improvements and things that we can build off of. We put in protocols very early on that limited the train traffic through this area during peak times. I was told that helped tremendously. When the school changed their schedule, I understand there was a communication gap. We got that fixed, and we're back to that practice of limiting train traffic along this line. We have also implemented permanent solutions from the standpoint of visibility and notification inside our company. So previous to this effort, we didn't have what we call train tags on our internal mapping system that our dispatchers could see. So now Market Street, Lockwood, and so many other critical crossings across Houston are tagged and very visible to our dispatchers so that they know where those critical crossings are. That helps them dispatch the trains. When I say dispatch, what I mean is we've got a group of people that are very similar to air traffic controllers. They control the train movements across Houston. So they're more aware of these critical crossings. We've also implemented alerts. So when a train stops on one of those critical crossings, those same dispatchers are getting alerts in real time. That didn't exist. That's a new system that we piloted here in Houston, and it's something that's being rolled out in other areas as well. That's operational. Those are the things that we can control. The other thing that we're doing, moving to the engineering and investment bucket, is we put a lot of money into our infrastructure. As a company, we spend over $3 billion a year on maintaining and growing our infrastructure to support the economy. Here in Houston, that equates to hundreds of millions of dollars. Investing in our Inglewood Yard, investing in our main line. All of that investment goes towards keeping trains moving so that as the economy here grows, as demand increases, we don't see congestion. That's important for us. That is part of the long-term solution. Stop trains aren't good for anyone, our customers, the community, and everyone on this panel. We need to keep trains moving, and a lot of that investment goes into keeping trains moving. And then the last piece is education, providing information. Principal Caesar, I know we spoke earlier. Your predecessor, Principal Huron, and our team talked about safety messaging. We brought some of our safety consultants to the school to talk about what it would look like to roll out a safety program there, helping to inform administrators, teachers, helping to connect with parents and what the appropriate rail safety messaging that they should be teaching at home, and ultimately connecting with the students of McReynolds. There's a lot of opportunity. We want to continue to work with you. I know we're engaged with you right now, but that's something else that can be put into place that we can all rely on from a safety messaging. It's as important as the other components as well.
But it seems like, you guys don't want the stop trains. The kids don't want the stop trains. And we're not just talking about stopped. We're talking also about very slow moving trains. So explain to people why that's happening at all. Why isn't there a bypass? I think we spoke with former Mayor White a few weeks ago, and he said at some point he was trying to get train companies to use a bypass. I thought at some point, was it Rick Perry? Anyway, somebody was trying to get trains to go all the way around Houston.
Yeah.
Why isn't that being done?
No, it's a great question. I wish I could put up a map of our rail lines. If you look at the Union Pacific network in Houston, it mirrors the interstate system. We literally have rail lines coming in from all directions, and they're all going to what we call Inglewood Yard. Inglewood Yard sits about a mile north of McReynolds. It is the largest yard in Texas. It's the busiest yard in Texas. I could probably qualify that bigger as the largest and busiest yard in the southern US, but I know it is in Texas. All of the train traffic that is either produced here, meaning it's originated here, or it's destined for Houston, needs to go into our system of rail yards first. They do that moving very slowly, and they come from all directions. So this line is one of several that enters into those system of yards and enters into Inglewoods from different directions. So this is one option. We have 100 trains moving through this region every day, but only about 10, maybe 15 trains a day use this line to get into and out of Inglewood Yard. And when you think about those trains, they're hauling very dense bulk commodities, very heavy commodities. And so when you enter a yard, you're slowing down to stop in the yard. And when you're leaving the yard, you're pulling from a stop, meaning you're going very slow. By design, the trains that move past McReynolds will typically be moving in that 5, 6, 7, 8 mile an hour range.
Okay. So all of these things that you're doing are good, but you have not mentioned the bridge. And students invited you guys to come to the school, hear them out. They had poster board presentations. They took you outside. They showed, I'm not sure if you were there specifically.
I saw it. Yeah, my team was there.
They showed, representatives of Union Pacific where they have to cross. And they asked you for one specific thing. They said, would you help us build a bridge? And what's the answer to that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a logical question. Union Pacific has very robust public project processes. And when I say public project, I mean any project that touches our railroad from the outside is a public project. It could be a roadway project. It could be a pedestrian project. It could be at grade, below grade, above grade. It could be anything that touches our railroad. We have a very robust process to go through building, constructing, managing, designing those public projects. It's a common misconception that Union Pacific leads those types of projects. We don't. We are a facilitator of those projects. So we have a team of people that's all they do. And any given day, I checked this week, they have 3,000 plus active public projects across our 23 states. A lot of those are in Texas. That's our team working with public entities and facilitating designs, facilitating construction, facilitating real estate needs associated with building a grade separation, whether it's over or under. But Union Pacific doesn't lead those projects. I say that we are committed to working alongside the city and the county and all the other entities in Houston that are focused on grade separations. I applaud the city. Just recently, in the past 2 years, the city was awarded a significant grant from the federal government to grade separate York, Sampson, and Navigation there in the East End. Important projects, and hopefully that type of project and our engagement there leads to a springboard for success in this area as well.
Okay, so Principal Caesar, you've heard all of the things that they, he's listing all of the things that they've tried to do at McReynolds. Why is that not good enough?
For me, this has been an ongoing problem. And if the students and the community have reached out prior to say, hey, this is something that we need, this is something that we want, this is something that the community will benefit from. At this point, it has to be not a Band-Aid to the situation, but an actual solution in order for the community to feel safe. We're only here, 10 months out of the year. So of course, we're doing our best working together, being good neighbors to each other to make sure that they're not crossing during those times of arrival and dismissal. But what about during summer? What about on the weekends? The community still has to thrive. The community still has to do their normal day-to-day. But if there's a train on the track that's sitting there, I'm not aware of it, so I can't reach out. Then how are we helping the community? How are we really doing what's best for them? And it's not just a situation, as my students stated, Ruby Tista, is it because we're in a lower income area? I live in a different area and I have yet to see a train sit on the track as long as I've seen here near McReynolds. So it's time for a real solution. And I applaud them for everyone working together. I know Commissioner Garcia has put together something and with a grant, but it's time that we put, action to it. We can be all talk for years and years, but it's now time to actually put action behind those words.
Yeah. And I want to get to Councilman Castillo, but really, I would like an answer to Ruby's question, Mr. Shelvitsky. Is this because the people in this neighborhood have less money? They maybe aren't the squeaky wheels of people in other neighborhoods constantly calling. They have less power. Is that why this problem has gone on for decades and decades with no solution, no permanent solution?
No, and that's another logical question. And I hear Principal Caesar and her comments about not seeing this in other areas as well. The fact is, our rail yards are located where they're at, and they've been there since the late 1800s. That is the only reason why there are slow moving and sometimes stop trains in the east end and northeast side of downtown. That is where the center of our operations are. If you go west of downtown, we have main lines coming into Houston, but no rail yards, no customer facilities, no port complexes. The centralized and kind of dense area for train traffic is really around the east side of downtown and the north side of downtown. That's why you see the slow moving and stop trains there.
So, Councilman, thank you for joining us. Tell us, I guess, how frustrating this is from your perspective as a representative of the city. I think Mayor Whitmire was asked in a council meeting last week by somebody who had seen our video, why isn't this a priority? Why aren't you doing something about it? And he said, look, there are these jurisdictional issues. The city does not control the trains, does not regulate, does not have power. It's a federal thing. So can you explain, do you feel like your hands are tied in some ways?
Well, thank you, Lisa, for the opportunity and for facilitating this discussion. This issue came to me after getting sworn in. I scheduled across my district 10 town hall meetings, and I wanted to hear directly from constituents throughout all the neighborhoods about, what it is that was going on in their lives. And the Denver Harbor Town Hall was where this issue came up, and it was residents that showed up voicing, frustration about the situation that kids were in and the trains specifically around McReynolds. One of the other things that I tried to do at these meetings was to be really proactive and solutions oriented. So if there were TxDOT projects nearby in the neighborhood, I would make sure TxDOT was there. Or if we knew Centerpoint was having some issues in the neighborhood, Centerpoint was there. So for this town hall particularly, I asked Union Pacific to be there, and they were there. And so I think part of the reason, we were able to quickly convene a meeting afterwards with the county, Public Works, Union Pacific, my office, was because they heard the frustration that I heard directly from the residents. And I remember one specifically who was very passionate about what kids were having to go through, with the train tracks and the safety and their concern. And so it became a priority for me right after that. So we convened this meeting and we got the ball rolling, and now we have this grant application that we've heard about at the federal level in partnership with Commissioner Garcia and hopefully Congresswoman Garcia. But I will tell you that it is extremely frustrating because these are my constituents. As their city council member, as their district council member, I'm their first line of defense on these things, where they go to for help and to see what can be done. And we had a lot of folks in that room in that meeting because there are a lot of hands involved in this. And so it's not easy for the city to try and forge a solution on its own. We've got to work with a number of other entities. You've heard a little bit about the price tag already, and that's going to be a hurdle in itself. This is just the first step, but I'm encouraged by the progress that we've made and how quickly we've been able to come together around this. That town hall was in February. We're in June, and we've applied for this grant. We have a number of stakeholders that have signed and submitted letters of support. And so I think there's some positive momentum around this. But we've got to figure out in the short term, while that process plays out, what can we do to keep children safe, specifically here at McReynolds. And I think that is where my focus is and where it can be frustrating because that's the immediate need. We know school is going to start back up and this is going to happen again, but what can we do before then to ensure that the story you heard earlier from Principal Caesar about the kid getting the backpack stuck in the train while, as it's about to take off, cannot happen again.
Right. And tell us, what is this grant? What are you hoping for? What are you asking for? Is this to build the bridge?
It's not to actually build the bridge. It's to study building the bridge, to study the feasibility. And so, again, it's step one in what will be a long process, but it's very encouraging that we have been able to get here so quickly when we've heard about how long this issue has been going on in the community, how frustrated folks are. And so I think that it's a positive sign. And being on city council for a little over 6 months now, things don't typically move this fast when you're talking about governments. So that's encouraging. But again, I think the immediate need is what can we do moving forward before, school starts in August to make sure we're keeping kids as safe as possible as these long-term solutions work their way out.
Right. And people hate studies. It sounds like you're wasting time, but feasibility studies are really important because there's another, in another state, there was a similar issue like this that was reported on by ProPublica, I believe. And they had this plan to build a bridge. Everyone was super excited about it. And then there were all these environmental concerns raised, and there were roadblocks put up. So you want to make sure that you're building it in a place that kids will actually use it, because that's an issue too. You build it too far out of the way, they're still going to take the risk to get over or to get home. And so I wonder, Principal Caesar, are you seeing an improvement since you've been there?
Honestly, I can say yes. When I first got here between July and September, or up to October, they would be here during arrival, and I would have kids trying to, get through. And again, letting the parents know and the kids know, you're not going to be counted tardy or anything like that. Just, I want you to wait until the train crosses and goes through before they come over. We've seen a decrease. And like I stated, when I'm about to do dismissal, I always check to make sure that there's a train not on the track. If there is, then I reach out to the 1-800 number, or I am constant contact with Mr. Zentek and the team to say, hey, there's a train sitting here, and they do their best to get it moved within, 3 to 5 minutes. So I can say that has absolutely helped us in our favor. Again, it's just that when we're not at school, what's happening? And my kids can let you know, and the parents will let you know that, they're waiting minutes, hours, and the blockage, they have to go around, or, they just go back home and kind of hope that it's moved by the time they come back out.
Yeah. I'm looking at some of the questions here, and Mr. Shelbitsky, somebody's asking, why doesn't UP conduct an engineering feasibility study for a pedestrian bridge? I mean, your company revenue around what, 24 billion a year? Why not put some money into this?
Well, it starts with the process, and we're all talking about the same process to study, evaluate. It could be a bridge plus some secondary items like fencing to make sure you channel people to the right place. There's real estate involved. We need to understand the project before financial commitments can be made. That's no different than any other public project along our system. And we evaluate them independently based on what they look like, what their impacts are, how complex are they, how are they functioning. We can't make that commitment today because we don't know what the project will be. But we have a process in place. These types of projects, pedestrian bridges, are not unique to this area. We have a whole manual built that is based on our history of working with public entities on how to approach building a bridge so that we don't have to go through 10 iterations of design. We have the standards in place in our manual that talk about that and how to work with us. And we will absolutely commit to facilitating whatever project is deemed the most appropriate for this area.
So some questions are a bit broader because, let's face it, almost everybody in Houston has to deal with some aspect of the train traffic. And someone's asking, you mentioned getting alerts when trains reach certain crossings. I think a lot of us wonder, why can't that information be available to everyone? Why aren't we getting alerts to the public? Why isn't Waze or, maps on my phone able to say, alert, alert, there's a traffic jam over here. Oh, and there's a train coming.
Great question. I share that question in terms of where we're at from a technological feasibility standpoint. I honestly think we're close with Waze and all the mapping systems that are out there. Just to give you some context on that alert, prior to, like I said, 3 years ago when I got here, we didn't have that system in place. We had more recently, and talk about in the last 15 years, installed what we call positive train control on our trains, which is a GPS system that didn't exist the prior 150 years in the railroad's operation. We've leveraged that technology to have the capability to create those alerts because we know exactly where the front end of the train is, the rear end of the train is, and all the crossings in between. It's that technological improvement over the past 15 years that allowed us to do this. Sugarland, I use Sugarland as an example. They have a process in place where their crossings are monitored. When a train goes through Sugarland, you can sign up for email alerts. There's a map on their website that shows if the crossings are clear or if there's a train going through town. The technology exists. It's a matter of getting it installed. And Sugarland is not an apples to apples comparison to Houston. There are over 700 crossings in Houston, at-grade crossings in Houston. And so we're talking about a much more expansive effort. But we know, in working with consultants from the city, consultants from the East End, that we can focus on a fewer number of critical crossings that support emergency services, that support our schools, and we can start there.
Yeah. Well, somebody, Mr. Shelbitsky, wants you to know that Savant Moore is at McReynolds right now, and there's a train blocking them. So maybe you could get word to somebody about that. Somebody else is saying that, McReynolds is the most severely impacted, but we've got KIP and Landtrip also, affected by similar issues. I wonder, Commissioner Garcia, you've been around, a long time, have you seen an example of a railroad company really working with the community in a way that kind of sets an example, something that could a precedent, something that we could follow in this situation?
2004 was when I was the council member of District H, and so I sit here 2 decades later talking about the same issue. I think some progress has been made, as Clint's been laying out, but it's not the type of progress that we have needed. And so, there's, when we talk about, when Clint talks about their feasibility approach, we really need that ramped up and put on steroids, because in all likelihood, the children crossing at McReynolds, their parents did the same thing. And quite likely, their grandparents did the same thing. So this is a true generational issue for that community that we've got to solve. And we're not asking for all of the city of Houston right now. I did work with UP when I was the first member of council to be able to get quiet zones installed. So there was some progress for that issue at the time, but that was just peace of mind and being able to sleep at night. This is true life and death for children. So I would really want to challenge UP to think about other more rapid ways to get on Waze, to get on Google Maps, so that we can plan our routes without saying, because train stoppage does not show up on Google Maps. It does not. And so seeing ways that we can see that, Google Maps will tell us if there's a pothole where there's a police officer. It will tell us where there's a wreck, but it will not tell us where there is a train stop. And so having that type of transparency would be much appreciated progress.
And Principal Caesar, I want to hand it over for questions. My colleague, Colleen Baker, is going to start reading some questions specifically. But I wanted to ask you one more thing. How do you think that this affects students? I was thinking about Ruby Tisa's comment. How do you think it affects them to know that they're not getting a solution? It's frustrating to wait at the train, but I guess emotionally, to know that no one cares enough. Maybe that's how they're reading it. Whether it's public officials or the executives at Union Pacific, no one cares enough to have solved this and ensure their safety.
I think the students who gave the presentation feel that, yes, they were heard at that time, but we're still in the same place. So why are you not doing this for us? What is really stopping it? And I get that, we have to do surveys about this and surveys about that and getting everyone on board. But kids don't think about that way. Kids think about the immediate thing that's going on right now in their lives. And I don't want it to be that 10 years from now they get a bridge, because they won't really see that. They want to see the now, and we need to see the now in order to make sure that they are being heard, that the community is being heard, and that their work wasn't in vain. It wasn't something to just do for the moment. It was something that they are really passionate about, that they are really concerned about, and they want to see what's best for their community. They want those things happening so that their community is safe all the time, not just during school hours.
Right. And kudos to those kids for speaking out. Colleen, what do our viewers want to watch, want to know?
Yes, there's a lot of questions coming in. I will continue with Principal Caesar real quick on this note. Have you heard from any other educators, like from KIPP or Lantrip Elementary, other schools that are affected? How is the education community helping you all at McReynolds specifically, or is there a way to help?
I have not heard from KIPP or Lantrip or any of the other educational institutions around. I've spoken with Wheatley, but a lot of their kids, they're our kids. So they have the same struggles and the same sentiments. But as for anyone outside of the Market Street area, I have not.
Okay. And then another person was asking, on the bipartisan funding or grants level. I know, Councilmember Castillo, you were talking a little bit about this. Can you speak to exactly what that feasibility study, like the grant or the one that is actually implemented right now, or what kind of grants you would want to go to if you haven't already approached some of them? Like what have you currently applied for, or what's pending that you could apply for?
So yeah, we've talked about the feasibility study, but in your view, what comes after that? If it's feasible.
Right. If it's feasible, we've actually drawn down some federal grants for grade separations that are currently in the capital improvement project. So there's the West Belt grade separations that are moving through design and then into construction. So we're going to see some relief on the east side of Houston. A couple of those are in my district. A couple of those are in District I. So there is a tangible example of how we can utilize federal funding along with city funding to help cover the cost of these projects, because they are significant. In terms of the bridge specifically, we're not talking about a grade separation, infrastructure project. We're talking about just building an access over the train so that folks can access the school safely. So it's not going to be as significant as an investment as separating the road from the track where it meets, but it will still be a significant cost. And so if the feasibility study comes back, this project is feasible and needed, I think we need to absolutely work with our federal partners to see what infrastructure dollars can be drawn down. I think we have to work with the county, potentially the state. I would even say we need Union Pacific to chip in here as well to cover the cost of this, because it can't just be the city, right? But it's going to take all of us working together. The bipartisan infrastructure law, the money that's working its way through the system, could there be dollars for that? I would hope so. But again, we rely so much on federal money to get these bigger infrastructure projects done. And so it's going to be working very closely with Congresswoman Garcia to help shepherd us through that process. But again, we have an example of this happening already. Those projects are in the works, and we are going to see the results of that. So there's a blueprint that we can follow that will allow us to potentially draw down federal money to help for this bridge.
Right.
If I could add.
I was going to say, Clint as well. Yes. Financially, what options or opportunities does Union Pacific have on that side?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, we evaluate these projects as they're designed and developed, and so we know more about them. So we can't make a financial commitment today, but we'll absolutely lean into this project. We'll lean into the other efforts that are going on to look at grade separations across the city. What I really wanted to mention was a growing movement here in the region that I think is probably the best next step from a broad perspective, and it's called HART. It's the Houston Area Rail Transformation Group. It is a group of regional entities. The city's involved, the county's involved, the railroads are involved, the Gulf Coast rail district's involved, TxDOT's involved, and there is an effort to look at the city's crossings, the county's crossings, the region's crossings, and to prioritize those, and then to really lean into going and getting that federal funding that we're all talking about, because that opportunity is huge right now. It's there, and it takes regional collaboration. It's modeled off of one that we've been involved in for years up in Chicago called CREATE. Chicago's been focused on grade separations and rail and roadway mobility for years, and they've had a concerted effort where they've put 60, 70, 80 projects, prioritized them, and then sequentially gone after funding. And it's been very, very successful taking that approach. And so it's, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Clint. So on some level, are you saying that this is a lack of part of the problem here is a lack of organization from our from our local officials. And we have had the Gulf Coast Rail District. We have had the Houston Beaumont freight rail studies with all of these, hundreds and hundreds of grade crossings outlined there and projects that could be done. What more do you think that local officials, where are they falling short, I guess, in these past efforts?
Yeah, I would never say that. What I would say is we're taking advantage of the programs that are available and joining efforts to ensure that the region's priorities are up front and center. And this is a project that can be put into that process and be towards the top of the priority list. And the more people you have leaning into it, the better your chances are in DC when they distribute the funding.
Mm-hmm. But you've seen those reports. I really am asking a serious question. I want to know, you've seen the reports that have been done for decades in this area, and they all outline the grade crossings, they outline the issues and some potential solutions. What is different about what HART is doing, or even what the Chicago group was doing?
I can't speak to what is different from the past. I've been here 3 years. So as I've been engaged, HART has emerged as kind of a leading opportunity or leading regional entity. As I've been here, I've seen the West Belt projects get funded. As I've been here, I've seen this group lead the effort with McReynolds. So I can't speak to the history in Houston, but I can say I'm optimistic about where we're at now and where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are asking if HART is accepting community feedback, or is it closed off to the public? Do you know if they have input coming in from the community, or is it separate?
That's a good question. I'll have to ask. I know we've got good leadership there. We've got a lot of public entities. We have a lot of private entities in that. I'll have to ask what that process is. I know they have board meetings. They're structured. So I'll have to look into it.
All right. We have time for maybe 1-2 more questions max. I know we talked about leadership on all forms, but has maybe Commissioner Garcia could speak to this. What has Mayor Whitmire's response been to all of this? I know he's taken some comments recently after the video surfaced. Can you, and maybe Mr. Castillo as well, mention, is he involved? Is he aware of the issue? What do you think?
I know that when we met the first week in office, we did talk about this and a few other issues. So it is top of mind for him, and I'm hoping that he can leverage his long tenure in the Senate to help create some progress in this regard. Because there's things like, for example, that we've got to be able to figure out, and that is like there are several lines that are infrastructure challenges to us that are actually lines that can be decommissioned. There's a rail line down Commerce Street as an example in the council member's district that we would love to redevelop that roadway, and but it does have a rail line right down the middle of it. And so seeing the process of decommissioning lines would be an important one. And I know that would help the mayor as well with his infrastructure priorities to be able to move forward on some of these projects. But it's this is an issue that whether it's been Bill White in 2004, Mayor Turner when we were with UP celebrating the 2 projects that we've gotten to create grade separations, or now with Mayor Whitmire, every mayor has had this issue put on their plate, and I'm hopeful that we'll find a much more aggressive and innovative way to address these challenges that McReynolds and others are facing.
And I'll add to that, I know that the mayor is aware of this. This did come up at council last week, where, he floated an idea about utilizing, enforcement as a way to help potentially alleviate the situation. And I know that Denver Harbor is on his priority list in terms of sidewalks and trying to figure out a way to get sidewalks to Denver Harbor and sidewalks in general. Pedestrian sidewalks are a big priority for him. So I know that this is on his radar. I know he's floated some ideas, and in general, you know, infrastructure projects and public safety are high on his priority list. And this is a public safety infrastructure project that we're talking about. So I agree with Commissioner Garcia. I hope he can leverage his experience in the Texas Senate, the relationships he's built throughout his long career, because we're going to need them to get this project through to completion. Absolutely. His leadership and his experience are going to be necessary to help us get across the finish line.
You know, one thing that no one's mentioned, and I wasn't even aware of it till recently, but years ago, there was actually a constitutional amendment passed. Voters voted for it to create a state fund that would pay for some of these rail relocation, or just, you know, dealing with some of these issues of the Great Crossings. Never funded. State lawmakers never put any money into it. Why? Does anybody know? Nobody knows.
No idea.
No.
But sometimes typical state.
Well, they've
That's
got
all.
the money, and it's very frustrating. And then we've got, you know, the Biden administration. You know, I think Clint mentioned this, but right now it's a really good time to apply for these grants because the Biden administration is making a lot of money available. But I just think the coordination has to be there. This idea of ticketing individual conductors, that was an act of desperation, I think, on behalf of Mayor White. And few people have been as fired up as he was about it, trying to get some change. That individual conductor, and it isn't his fault, sitting in the train. The people in power need to do something. And Union Pacific has a lot of power here, Clint. And another frustrating thing is when Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia and others have legislation in Congress to put limits on how long the trains can sit there, sanctions, and your lobbyists fight it. And that is very frustrating because some kind of limits make sense. I don't know if there's any response. I didn't see him. But
So if there's a question there, I'm happy to answer it.
why are you fighting why are your lobbyists fighting what seems like common sense limits on how long these trains can sit on tracks and block traffic?
I'm not aware that our lobbyists are involved in that. You mentioned we have the power to do something as a railroad company. We're committed to making sure trains move through this area safely. We're committed to improving mobility where we can and working with all of our public partners. We are not sitting back. We are actively engaged. And I think we've been more engaged in Houston probably than we've ever been as far as the groups and the offices that we're involved in and the projects that we're involved in. We're not sitting back. And I'm making a commitment that we're going to stay involved. We're going to continue to invest in this area. We're going to continue to have a long-term presence supporting Houston, its economy, but also its safety. We're committed to that.
We're glad to hear that. We're glad you're in town. We're glad all of you showed up today. Thank you so much for your voices. Principal Caesar, you're working hard over there at McReynolds, and we appreciate what you do. Hope some relief can come soon. Thank you all for attending and for being interested in this issue.
Lisa, thank you, and thank the Houston Chronicle for putting this front and center. 2 decades, at least in this one body here.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you all. Take care.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.